In March 2001, a gruesome crime unfolded in Germany that would horrify the world, not just for its brutality, but for its shocking consent. This is the story of Armin Meiwes, a man who became known as the Cannibal of Rotenburg. He didn't just kill and eat another person. His victim agreed to it. The case challenged everything people thought they knew about morality, legality, and the limits of human behavior. Today, we'll explore who Armin Meiwes was, how this horrifying act happened, and what it revealed about the darkest corners of human psychology. Armin Meiwes was born in 1961 in Essen, Germany, into a world that would quickly become defined by absence and control. His childhood was a portrait of profound loneliness. When Armin was just 8, his father abandoned the family, vanishing from his life and leaving a gaping void that would fester for decades. This left young Armin solely in the care of his domineering and possessive mother, Waltraud. She fostered an unnaturally close, codependent relationship with her son, deliberately isolating him from his peers. In the sprawling 44-room farmhouse that felt more like a cage than a home, Armin became his mother's entire world, and she, his. He later recalled how she would sometimes dress him in girls' clothing, blurring his sense of identity and deepening his alienation. To combat the crushing solitude, Armin's young mind invented an imaginary friend he called Frankie, a constant presence in a life devoid of real connection. But even this wasn't enough. A far darker fantasy began to take root, a grotesque solution to his lifelong fear of being alone. He came to believe that if he could physically consume another person, their very essence would merge with his. They would become a permanent part of him, an internal companion he could never lose. This wasn't about violence for its own sake. It was a deeply twisted search for an unbreakable bond, a perversion of intimacy born from emotional starvation. As he entered adolescence, these macabre daydreams morphed, becoming increasingly graphic and intertwined with his sexuality, evolving into a concrete, all-consuming cannibalistic desire. To the outside world, however, there were no signs of the darkness brewing within. Meiwes constructed a meticulous facade of normalcy. He served for 12 years in the German army, rising to the rank of Master Sergeant, a model of discipline and order. After his military service, he settled into a quiet life in the picturesque town of Rotenburg an der Fulda, working as a respected computer repair technician. His neighbors knew him as polite, well-spoken, and impeccably neat. A man who kept to himself, but in a way that seemed respectable, not suspicious. This carefully maintained exterior was a perfect shield, hiding the monstrous turmoil that raged just beneath the surface of his quiet, orderly life. A pivotal moment came in 1999, with the death of his mother. While her passing freed him from her constant control, it also plunged him into absolute, deafening solitude. Now alone in the vast, empty, family home, the fantasies he had suppressed for decades surged to the forefront of his mind with unstoppable force. There were no more barriers, and just as his internal world was primed for action, the external world provided the tool. The internet was exploding. In the anonymous, unregulated corners of early web forums and chat rooms, Meiwes discovered he wasn't alone in his thoughts. He found communities like the infamous Cannibal Cafe, where the most extreme taboos were openly discussed. His private horror was about to find an audience, and more terrifyingly, a willing participant. In the late 1990s, the internet was a new frontier, a digital Wild West where anonymity was currency. In its darkest corners, communities formed around desires too extreme for the physical world. It was here, in chat rooms and forums dedicated to cannibalism, that Armin Meiwes found a place to voice his lifelong obsession. Under the username Frankie, he wasn't just exploring a fantasy, he was on a mission. He began posting messages, not seeking roleplay or titillation, but a genuine volunteer. He was looking for someone who wanted to be eaten, literally. For years, his posts were met with a predictable mix of horror, ridicule, and, most frustratingly for him, fellow fantasists. Hundreds of people responded, but their interest was confined to the safety of their keyboards. They wanted to talk, to imagine, but nobody was willing to cross the line into reality. Meiwes was patient, meticulously filtering through the noise. He was a predator, but one who couldn't hunt. He had to wait for his prey to come to him, to prove they were as serious about being consumed as he was about consuming. Then, after years of searching, a new message appeared. It was from Bernd Jürgen Brandes, a 43-year-old computer engineer from Berlin. On the surface, Brandes was a portrait of success, a respected manager at the technology giant Siemens. He was intelligent, articulate, and by all accounts, living a conventional life. But beneath that facade was a secret, all-consuming desire that mirrored Meiwes' own. Brandes wasn't interested in fantasy. He explained that his ultimate wish was to be slaughtered and eaten, to have his body become a part of someone else. For Meiwes, this was the signal he had been waiting for. What followed was an intense period of communication. Over several months, the two men exchanged hundreds of emails and logged countless hours in private chats. They moved beyond the what-if and into the how-to. Their correspondence was a chillingly practical and detailed blueprint for Brandes' death. They discussed methods, timing, and the logistics of Brandes' journey from Berlin to Meiwes' home in Rotenburg. A strange, dark intimacy formed between them, the kind only possible between two people sharing a taboo so profound it isolated them from the rest of humanity. They were collaborators in a project of mutual, horrific fulfillment. Finally, on March 9, 2001, the plan was set in motion. Brandes purchased a one-way train ticket to Rotenburg. As his train cut through the German countryside, he was knowingly heading towards his own meticulously planned demise. Meiwes met him at the station, and the two men who had only known each other as digital avatars came face to face. Back at Meiwes' centuries-old farmhouse, Brandes made one final, crucial request. He insisted that the entire act, from beginning to end, be recorded on video. For Brandes, this was his testament, irrefutable proof that this was his choice, his will being done. For Meiwes, the camera offered a different kind of assurance. He believed it was his legal shield, evidence that he was not a murderer, but merely a facilitator for a man's ultimate, albeit grotesque, fantasy. What happened next, on the night of March 9, 2001, is almost impossible to comprehend. Inside the seemingly tranquil farmhouse, the stage was set. Armin Meiwes switched on his mini-DV camcorder, its small red light a silent witness to the pact he and Bernd Brandes were about to fulfill. The camera would capture hours of footage, a meticulous and chilling record. To prepare himself, Brandes willingly consumed around 20 sleeping pills and a bottle of schnapps. He was not coerced. He was a ready participant in his own demise, seeking the fulfillment of a fantasy he had harbored for years. For both men, this was the culmination of a long, lonely search. According to Meiwes' confession and the graphic videotape, Sobo bor grar gom jo wo waru I was dem before car my miu werid biom wies to go the sever outbase sever Brandes' penis, which they would then cook and eat together, a ritual of ultimate connection. Meiwes, lacking any surgical skill, attempted the amputation. The act was clumsy and brutal. Afterwards, in a moment of grotesque surreality, he tried to pan-fry the severed part with salt, pepper, and garlic. When it proved too tough, he tried boiling it, but the result was the same. Brandes, meanwhile, was bleeding profusely. He attempted to eat a piece of his own flesh raw but was already growing too weak, his body shutting down from massive blood loss and the cocktail of drugs and alcohol. The fantasy was collapsing into a grim reality. For the next 3 hours, Brandes lay in a bathtub, slowly bleeding out. In a display of profound and chilling detachment, Meiwes left him there and spent the time reading a science fiction novel. As Brandes' condition worsened, Meiwes realized the consensual act had failed. He later claimed it was an act of mercy. He returned to the bathroom, gave Brandes a final kiss, and ended his life with a knife to the throat. The line from consensual fantasy to cold-blooded murder had been irrevocably crossed. With Brandes dead, Meiwes' own fantasy could be fully realized. He moved the body to a slaughter room he had prepared, complete with a meat hook. Over the next 10 hours, he methodically dismembered the body, portioning the remains into plastic bags. He stored over 20 kilograms of human flesh in his chest freezer, labeling the bags with codes like roast and steak. This was the beginning of a new, horrifying ritual. Over the next 10 months, Meiwes would periodically cook and eat the remains, preparing elaborate meals on his finest china. He would light a candle and dine while watching old Disney movies, finally living his dream of perfect companionship. This grotesque routine was not born of rage or sadism. In Meiwes's deeply disturbed mind, it was the fulfillment of an emotional need that had haunted him since childhood. A deep-seated loneliness and a yearning for a brother who could never leave. By consuming Brandes, he believed he was achieving the ultimate union, making Brandes a literal part of himself forever. The videotape wasn't just evidence, it was a treasured home movie, a memento of the moment he finally felt complete. For Armin Meiwes, this was not an act of violence but a twisted, horrifying act of love. For more than a year, Meiwes lived quietly in Rotenburg. He continued his job, greeted neighbors, and seemed entirely ordinary, but eventually, he returned to the same cannibalism forums, looking for another volunteer. This time, someone reported him to the police. When authorities searched his home in December 2002, they found human remains, bones, a videotape documenting the act, and the infamous freezer full of meat. The footage confirmed everything: the meeting, the killing, and the consensual nature of the crime. Police described the scene as one of the most disturbing they had ever encountered. The case quickly gained international attention. The question was unlike any in legal history: if someone volunteers to be killed and eaten, is it still murder? In 2004, Armin Meiwes was charged with manslaughter and sentenced to 8.5 years in prison, because the court ruled that the act was consensual. However, the decision sparked outrage across Germany. Prosecutors argued that consent did not make the act less brutal or less criminal. 2 years later, Meiwes was retried. In 2006, he was convicted of murder and disturbing the peace of the dead, and sentenced to life imprisonment. He remains incarcerated in Castle Prison to this day. Psychologists who examined Meiwes described him as intelligent but emotionally damaged, a man whose need for connection turned into a disturbing fixation. They said his cannibalism was not driven by sadism or hate, but by a twisted form of affection and loneliness. In his mind, by consuming another person, he could keep them with him forever, a way to overcome abandonment and fear of loss. Experts also noted how the internet played a key role. The anonymity of online forums allowed Meiwes to find others who shared or entertained his fantasy, turning what might have stayed a dark thought into a deadly reality. The Rotenburg cannibal case shocked the world not only for its horror, but for what it revealed about human psychology, consent, and morality. It led Germany to introduce stricter laws surrounding acts of extreme violence and the use of the internet for criminal solicitation. The case inspired documentaries, books, and even films, including the movie Grim Love, though many were banned in Germany for being too graphic. For many, the most disturbing part wasn't just the crime, it was that two adults agreed to it. The story of Armin Meiwes, the Cannibal of Rotenburg, remains one of the most disturbing crimes in modern history. A lonely man's obsession turned into an act that defied morality and comprehension. And while justice was served, the case continues to raise haunting questions about consent, sanity, and the human mind's darkest desires. What do you think? Can someone truly consent to their own death? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more true crime deep dives.